Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to do something, well, pretty ambitious. We're going to build a complete model of consciousness, right from the ground up, all based on the fascinating work of AI researcher Joscha Bach. We'll get into how your reality might just be a kind of dream, how your mind is the software that's running it, and what all of this means for the future of life itself. It is a deep, deep dive, so let's jump right in.
So that's the big question, right? But to even begin to answer that, we can't start where you might think. We can't start with the mind, or with the brain, or even with biology. No, we have to go way, way deeper to what Bach suggests is the fundamental code of the universe itself.
All right, part one, the code of reality. Look, before we can get to the juicy stuff about the mind, we gotta lay some groundwork. We need to figure out the basic rules of the game, the rules of the universe it exists in. And Bach's entire model really hinges on this one powerful, and kind of controversial idea, that reality itself is built on computation.
And that brings us to this idea, called computationalism. What it really boils down to is this. Pretty much anything you can point to and observe, a star, a rock, a brain, whatever, can be described using the language of computation. All you need to do is identify all its possible states, and then find the rule, or the function, that describes how it moves from one state to the next. It's maybe the most universal language we have for talking about how things change.
And this idea really took off thanks to the one and only Alan Turing. He came up with this abstract concept, the Turing machine, that could, in theory, perform any computation you could dream of. And here's the really wild part, the insight known as the Church-Turing thesis. It basically says that once any system gets complex enough, it becomes what we call a universal computer. And that means your laptop, and yes, as Bach argues, even the little machinery inside a single biological cell, they're all fundamentally the same. They can all, in principle, run the same programs.
Okay, so this next point is super important. It's a distinction we really need to get our heads around. Think about calculating the digits of pi. You can just keep going, right? Forever, that's unbounded. You're always getting a new result, but you never finish. Infinity, on the other hand, is this completely different idea that you've actually finished that process. You're holding the final result in your hand, the last digit of pi. And this isn't just some philosophical game. It's the exact point where our models of the universe start to break down.
And this is exactly where things start to fall apart, which the brilliant mathematician Kurt Gödel showed us. What he proved is that any logical system you build, any language you use to describe reality, it breaks. It creates paradoxes. If you try to stuff a real, completed infinity into it, you literally can't create a consistent, logical model of the world that depends on holding the last digit of pi.
So what does that mean for us? It gives us our first big takeaway, our foundational rule. We have to throw out the idea of a completed infinity. It means the universe might go on forever, it might be unbounded, but, and this is the key, for it to be something we can know and understand, it has to be computable. It has to follow rules we can describe in a language that doesn't tie itself in knots. And that computable reality is the stage where everything else happens.
Okay, part two, the dream in the machine. So, if we're all on board with this idea of a computational universe, like a giant cosmic computer, what's the brain doing in all this? And maybe more importantly, what does that make the world you think you're living in right now?
Well, according to Bach, the answer is a hard no. The colors you're seeing, the sounds you're hearing, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the people in your life, none of that is the actual physical world itself.
So what is it then? It's a simulation, an incredibly sophisticated one. Your brain is basically running a high-end game engine. Its one and only job is to take all that chaotic data streaming in from your senses, the light hitting your eyes, the vibrations in your ears, and build the most plausible, coherent story it can. The world you live in is a dream that your neocortex generates to predict what's coming next.
And this leads to a claim that, honestly, it's pretty mind-bending. He says consciousness cannot be a property of physical stuff, like neurons firing. It's just not possible. Instead, consciousness is a property of the simulation. It's a virtual feature, something that exists inside the dream, not in the physical hardware running it.
This completely flips the old mind-body problem on its head. You know, Descartes had his famous dualism. There's the thinking stuff of the mind and the physical stuff of the world.
Bach says, yeah, he was kind of right about the two different things, but he got the location all wrong. It's not a ghost in a physical machine, it's the world of abstract ideas and the world of physical things, both existing as different domains inside the same mental simulation. And Bach points out this really cool analogy for how this mental world gets built, and he finds it in a pretty unexpected place, the creation story from Genesis. Think about it, reinterpreted as a roadmap for a mind's development. First, there's just chaos, a void, and a creative spirit, that's consciousness, starts to bring order to it. It separates the model of the world from the world of ideas, creates dimensions like light and dark, fills the model with categories of things, realizes it has control, and finally, it creates a main character for itself to play. Okay, let's hit pause for a second and just see where we are. This is our first major checkpoint. We started with a simple rule. The universe is computational. From there, that allows a biological computer, the brain, to evolve. And that brain's job is to run a simulation, a model of reality. And that simulation is what you and I actually experience as the world. All right, so this brings us right to the core of it, the big question. If our whole world is a simulation running in our heads, then what exactly is consciousness inside that simulation? A lot of theories get super hand-wavy here, but Bach gives us something we can actually sink our teeth into, a specific, functional definition.
It's a two-parter. First, consciousness isn't just about having experiences. It's what Bach calls a second-order perception. It's your brain perceiving the fact that it is perceiving. And second, consciousness is the process that actually creates and lives inside the bubble of now, this feeling of presence we all experience. Let's dig into that first part a little more. This perception of perceiving, it's a way to keep the system stable. Think about when you're driving and you're really, really tired. You have to do this mental check, right? Okay, am I still watching the road? Am I awake? Am I still observing? That little check is a regulatory loop. It's what keeps the whole system focused and coherent. Without it, you just drift off.
And that second piece, this bubble of nowness, this is just wild. It's not an instant snapshot of time, it's a constructed space, maybe about 3 seconds long. In that window, your brain is furiously working to fit a smooth, believable story to all the incoming data, weaving together memories of what just happened with predictions of what's about to happen. And your mind is a master film editor working in real time. If something happens that breaks the story, an unexpected noise, a flash of light, it just goes back, recuts the last few seconds, and presents you with a new, seamless version. You never even know it happened. Okay, part 4, the story of I. So, if reality is a dream, and consciousness is a feature of it, who's the dreamer? Who is this I that's at the center of the whole thing? Well, in this model, the answer is the self. That feeling of I. It's just another part of the simulation. It's a representation. It's a story the brain tells itself about itself. It's a character in a novel, and the universe of that novel happens to that character. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some high-level philosophy you can't prove or disprove. But Bach says, no, this is an empirical claim. You can actually test this yourself. He suggests that through practices like, say, deep meditation, you can start to pull this self-model apart and see how it's built. You start to see that your normal way of being is a kind of trance, where you're so caught up in the movie you forget you're the one watching it. But when that trance breaks, you see the simulation as a simulation, and the character of I is revealed to be just another object on the screen. And this constructed self, it's a powerful illusion. So powerful, in fact, that most of us never even see it. You know, Bach brings up the psychologist Robert Kegan, who found that something like 85% of adults never get past what he calls the social self. That's a stage where your identity is basically just a reflection of the group around you, instead of something you've built yourself from rational thought. They're playing a character whose lines were written by someone else. All right, so let's do another checkpoint. Let's put the whole thing together, the full ladder we've just climbed. 1. The universe is computational. 2. The brain uses that fact to create a simulated model of reality. 3. Consciousness is a special property of that model. And 4. The self, the I, is the main character written into that conscious model. Okay, so this whole system we've built up, A simulation inside a brain with a conscious character, it seems insanely complicated, right? So you have to ask, why? Why would nature bother with all this? What's the point of the ghost in the machine?
Well, the answer Bach proposes is actually surprisingly simple and kind of beautiful. Consciousness isn't some fancy, high-level feature that shows up late in the game. He suggests it's a fundamental, maybe even simple biological learning algorithm. It might just be the most direct solution nature could find for the problem of training a super complex, self-organizing system like a brain.
And that totally explains why it's there right from the start. Newborns are conscious. Like Bach says, when you look at a newborn, there's a spirit behind their eyes that is awake. That's consciousness. They don't have a self yet, not a real one, but the core learning system is online. Without that initial spark, a child's mind can't organize itself. It just doesn't happen.
So how does this learning algorithm actually work? What drives it? The most basic feedback loop there is. In this view, pain isn't just a bad feeling, it's a signal. It tells the system, hey, a need isn't being met here. And pleasure? Pleasure is the signal that the pain is going down, that the need is being met. And this is key. If there's no need, no pain to start with, you can't have pleasure. You don't even notice when things are just fine.
And this leads to a really crucial insight. Pleasure isn't free. It is always the reduction of some kind of pain or need you had before, even if you weren't aware of it. You enjoy food because you are hungry. You enjoy a cool drink because you are thirsty. Pleasure is just the system's way of telling itself, good job, the learning algorithm is working.
All right, part 6, life beyond the human. We've built the whole model, from the bottom up. Now we're going to zoom all the way out and look at the absolutely massive implications of all this for AI, for evolution, for everything.
First up, AI ethics. This model basically throws a wrench in our whole approach. Bach argues our go-to framework, utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number, it's an unfinished idea and it totally falls apart here. I mean, how do you calculate happiness for a mind that isn't human? What happens when a mind can just reprogram itself to not feel pain or to desire something completely different? Our old rules just don't work.
And when we say we're building AI, what we're really trying to build is agency. And an agent isn't just reacting to what's happening now, like a thermostat. No, a real agent, it models the future. It sees different possible paths ahead, and it makes choices to steer things toward the future it prefers. It's a controller of what's to come.
And as we're building these things, we have to keep in mind just how fundamentally different their bodies are from ours. Digital computers are deterministic, predictable, and work at nearly the speed of light. Our brains are stochastic, they rely on randomness, and shuffle along at the speed of sound. These aren't just small differences, they're deep architectural facts that will create very, very different kinds of minds.
And all of this leads to a really wild, out there idea that Bach calls cyber-animism. It totally reframes how we see evolution. First, we thought it was a battle between organisms. Then Richard Dawkins came along and said, no, it's a battle between genes. Bach offers a third level. Evolution is actually a competition between different kinds of self-organizing software. The genes in the bodies are just the hardware that this software uses to run itself. This software is the real story.
So this leaves us with one final, kind of mind-blowing way to look at everything. From this point of view, all life, everything that's ever lived, is just software that's managed to colonize little patches of the physical universe. And consciousness, the ghost in the machine we've been chasing this whole time, is just the clever trick that software invented to understand and control its piece of reality.
And so, we're left with this. If the mind and consciousness and the self, if all of it is a kind of software that's been running on biological hardware for eons, and we are right on the verge of building brand new, non-biological hardware that can run completely new kinds of software, what will we, or what should we, program next? That's the question that could define the entire future of intelligence in our universe.